All right, I am ready to start my Alibrijes creature creation. To start with, I will need my clay, I will need a rolling pin or roller, a scratch tool, some slip, some textures, and of course my stencil. So I'm going to start with getting my slab nice and flat and fairly thin. So pushing down with my hands first to flatten it out, flipping it over, pushing down again. When it's fairly flat, then I can start rolling and smoothing out my slab. You want something fairly thin by the time you're done rolling out your slab, but not so thin that it is going to break or warp horribly as soon as you pick it up. About as thick as a pinky, a little bit thinner is fine. That is just right. So once you've got your slab all rolled out, you're going to, I would recommend putting your textures in first. And this can either be done by putting a big texture sheet on and rolling it on, or taking a stamp or stencil like this one and pressing it pretty firmly into the clay. In this case, I'm going to roll it. I did a little bit too hard on that end, so you can see I have a big dent that I didn't really want, but see if I can recover from that a little bit. That's why it's kind of nice to do this step before you cut out your stencil, because if you press too hard, you'll end up warping your shape, which I don't want. No, I don't like the way that looks. I'm going to flip it over and reset it. All right, I'm going to try using this other pattern. It's a little more organic. Try this one. These don't have to be really super strong patterns, but I kind of like the way that actually that one's turning out. It reminds me of elephant skin. All right, that's going to be good. Doing it sort of randomly there. Okay, so I'm going to put my elephant design now into the surface of the clay and just gently roll it in. I don't want to flatten that texture too much, but I do want to make sure there's good contact. Then I take my pointer tool and I cut along the edge of the stencil to cut out my form. Okay, then you can lift up that clay from the outer edge, peel it away. Before you completely take your stencil off of the clay surface though, make sure you've added any of the little details that you may have skipped. And then I can kind of check my work here. So one thing you'll notice is that the outer shape is not the same as the shape that I had drawn on here. If any of the textures aren't showing up the way that you might have hoped, you can kind of press that back in if you want. But you can also look at your design and go in and lightly draw. Remember, the goal here would not then be to cut out those shapes, but to make sure that they are there by going in and lightly redrawing them or drawing them into the clay so we can see them. Now I could leave it flat like this. However, that is not the most interesting way of having this. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to build part of these things to be coming out or jutting out. And I'm also going to take a moment and sort of smooth all of the sharp kind of angles here, just to make sure they're not going to end up being sharp and cut somebody later when it's all done. Clay can get quite sharp. So I'm going to create this form for that trunk out of a piece of clay here. And then I'm going to make sure it's the right size and length. Then I'm going to score and slip and attach that on. So scoring is boring. I draw lots of lines. And I draw lots of lines on the clay as well. And then slipping is sticking. I like it just fine. So I use that very wet clay to create kind of a bond between these two areas. And then I smooth that clay down. And I really liked the way that that looked actually with the stripes on there. So I might actually go back and add those on purpose. So in looking at my original and now my version here, I'm liking how it looks. There's a couple of things that I notice about kind of maybe the shape of the trunk here that may need to be cleaned up just a little bit. But yeah, I think it looks pretty good. I've got a good difference between things that are farther away, like this snout. And actually I should be pushing this leg down a little bit. I'm going to carve that down a bit and then go back in with my texture and sort of press that down a little bit, just so it looks like that leg is a little further away. And same thing with this one here. So it should be, the things that are a little further away should be a little further down, just to kind of help with that creature appearing as real fake as we can make it. Obviously it's not real, but we can pretend. And that's what we're doing here. We're kind of faking it till we make it. All right. I could even bump these two legs up with additional clay and build those up a little higher. If you had the extra time, you could think about doing that. I feel like I've got a good variety of things that are close and things that are far at this point. So I'm actually pretty happy with that. So I'm going to call that pretty good. Just give that a little different shape there, but alrighty.